Good garbage to me is something that can be born again and reused and not thought of as something that doesn't belong in our circle of existence.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the Good Garbage Podcast. My name is Ved Krishna. My primary reason for existence has been to find ways to leave our wonderful planet cleaner. We will be speaking with material innovators, creators, and propagators to learn from them how we can build for scale and towards a regenerative future. Their stories will help us answer the big question, what is good garbage? It is so important for all of us to learn from a customer perspective, and it becomes even better when you find one who is truly committed towards the welfare of our planet. We get to speak with Maddie Hamann, who is the co-founder and marketing lead at Patcha, a company that provides us with wonderful gluten-free bread made using generatively sourced buckwheat. Maddie and her team look at the entire value chain closely and do not make any compromises on their ethos. They find ways and means to use entirely home-compostable packaging, right down to a clip made from corrugated paper. The desire to make change is so complete when it comes to Patcha, and I emerged full of hope through this conversation, and I'm sure you will too. Enjoy the episode. Hello, hello. We have Maddie Hamann with us today, who's the co-founder and director of marketing at Patcha, which is a gluten-free bread. And the great thing is, it is in 100% home compostable packaging. So delighted to have you here, Maddie. And I'm going to start with asking you, do you know there is a meaning for Patcha in Hindi?
In Hindi, I didn't know that.
Interestingly, it means digestion.
No way.
Yeah. I was like, she might know that, that
That's
Pacha means
cool.
digestion. And there's a term called Pachak Shakti, which is the energy of digestion, which is what the whole Ayurvedic system is around.
Wow. That's awesome.
So starting right there, how did the name come about then?
So the term Pacha it's from from Andean mythology. Our recipe came to us from an Argentinian family. And, the probably the most commonly known or widely known term from the Andean mythology is Pachamama. Interestingly enough, means like we tend to think of it as Mother Earth in the Western mindset. It actually means something more like everything that is, like the entire physical realm. But, just for the sake of why we called our company Patcha, it really is because we want to be tenders of our home planet, of the earth that we walk on and the matrix we live in.
That's so beautiful, and I'm glad I've added another angle to it.
Yeah, that's like so ridiculously perfect. Oh my
I
gosh.
was like, yeah, I did think about Pachamama, but then I said, it is too, just Pacha is so, it could be a possibility that you had that also, but now you have that. Okay, so I'm going to step back. I want to talk to you and learn from you about your growing up and influences that led you to kind of believing in what you just talked about in terms of a holistic life.
Sure. Yeah. Gosh. Well, how far back do you want me to go? I grew up in Ohio, which is not like known as being the most forward-thinking, sustainable state. And also at the same time, it's just got really down to earth people. And my dad's a big gardener, like a big gardener. He grows like 20 tomato plants every year. And we always had compost. We always sorted out our recycling, and we would take it to the little like triple bin and throw the glass in the thing and the paper in the other one. And so my parents have always cared about the planet as well. I started learning about climate change when I was in late high school in a very minor capacity. I went to my undergrad at Notre Dame and I studied civil engineering primarily because, well, my grandfather was an engineer and it was easier to switch out of engineering than into engineering. And by the time I realized I didn't really want to build highway overpasses for my career, like I was like, yeah, I really want to like do that. I discovered that civil engineering was something that was broader, it touches anything that is in the public sphere, and that includes like storm management. And I wasn't studying the sustainability or like planet science directly, but I was always really interested in it and different projects. Like I don't remember what the subject of the project was when I was in college, but I decided to study the impact of the meat industry on various, water quality and yeah, just like all sorts of things. And I remember just being totally and utterly blown away by like the impact that the conventional meat industry has on methane and everything. And yeah, so I always leaned towards like just having an interest in what was happening with our planet. And through civil engineering, I studied fluid mechanics. I ended up graduating and deciding to go to Scripps, Institution of Oceanography in San Diego, to study oceanography. And I was primarily motivated because I wanted to use my math and science skills towards helping to find the solution to climate change. And from where I stood, I just assumed that we must need to know more. Like, in order for us to make better decisions about how to interact with the planet, we must need to understand better how the planet works. Yeah, I spent 6 years at Scripps, and I think every single year that I was there, I became more and more clear that I would not be studying oceanography for my entire life because we just know so much already about our planet. And it was just very clear that the understanding was not connecting to shifts that needed to happen. Like people weren't changing just because scientists were saying our planet is going down the toilet here, people. We need to make some changes. So, yeah, I after I graduated, I worked for the Navy like as a civil servant for about a year, and then we started this company.
And we'll, of course, talk a lot more about the company. But I
Yeah,
wanted to take a little step back. You reminded me of a friend who's been on the show. He's the CEO of a company called Temperpack, which is also a very, very interesting company.
yeah,
And he is a civil engineer. And it's interesting. He practiced civil engineering for so many years and then kind of realized how he can adapt that knowledge of construction into constructing different things. And it was a
sure.
fascinating conversation. And the second thing that came to my mind is that my wife grew up next to you in West Virginia. And it's such pristine land. But of course, you're totally right. Nobody knows about this. So I still go to my in laws and I find everything is in styrofoam. I'm like, it's really not hit there yet. That there is a significant challenge that is happening. So I want to dig a little bit more about this choice of oceanography. And of course, we know that there is so little we know about the oceans. So what is it? Why is it that it didn't just keep you there? Because that could very well lend you towards sustainability as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I studied physical oceanography, so ocean physics. I studied the thing that we probably know the least about, which is turbulence and just the difficulty in connecting what little we do know about the tiny little scales of turbulence, all the way up to the scale of the planet. Really, I'd like to sum it up. It was just like we could continue to know more about this, and there's still so much to learn. Um, but none of the learnings that are happening in the field that I was in were going to start making the shifts that I realized needed to be happening right now. They needed to be happening 10 years ago, really. It was just like I could spend my whole life doing this and it's interesting, but it's not it's not going to make the change that I really see needs to happen. And I think I also I expanded my worldview coming to California, and where I used to believe that, I grew up in the public school system, was in academia for almost my entire life, most of my life so far, I was in academia. And the, I just had a deep belief that my primary worth was tied to my intellect and my ability to generate new understanding about the world. But I then also realized that I have other skills. I grew up in the Midwest, and people are very friendly and easy to communicate with in the Midwest. And just my skills, like being able to put together a team and lead a team and connect with people on the things that they care about, and just like relating and leading, that I realized like, oh, those are actually really valuable skills too. And maybe like, yeah, sure, I might be able to solve differential equations, but maybe that's not really why I was put here on this planet.
And that's usually a deep search to, the last statement that you made. Why was I put here on this planet?
Yeah.
That's the deep thinking that once you get an answer, that life completely kind of starts to change. So yeah, so let's talk about COVID a little bit. In our research, what comes up is that you're working with science, and how did that influence the transformation that you had?
I studied physical oceanography from an observationalist's standpoint. So during grad school, I spent something like half a year or more actually on a boat at sea with instruments studying turbulence. And a lot of my involvement with that work was actually just like to be what they call a PI, or like a, what is that? It's not private investigator. It's principal investigator. I'm so far away from this field now.
It'll be a
So
little different if you were
yeah,
a private
private investigator.
investigator.
So to be a principal investigator on these big projects, like you're not just taking data and analyzing it, you're figuring out, okay, what is the problem? What are the funding sources that I could use to get funding to study the problem? How will I study it? How will I put together my team? How will I run a lab? So it's just all these pieces of managing a huge project. And actually, my PhD was based on data that I got a grant to go out and collect the data myself. So I did a whole bunch of project management during my PhD. And then, during COVID, all of that, all the projects kind of got shut down. There were still some teams going out to sea, but my role shifted more into a role that was like I was helping our engineering team remotely work together to upgrade systems and like do their engineering work that they had always done in person, at their desks side by side from their home virtual remote offices. Um, Thrilling stuff, really. But, all that to say, like, it was becoming more clear that actually my primary skill set was in helping organize people and administrate and understand the different pieces of work that were happening and how they fit together. A little bit of background here. My husband, Adam, is my co-founder, and he's a serial entrepreneur. He His most recent business that he founded is called Boochcraft. Some of you may know it. It's a hard alcohol or a hard kombucha. It was the first of its kind. And he, around the time that we started dating, he was kind of transitioning out of his role as marketing director. And they had kind of like he had hired himself out of all of the positions that he was working at that company, and kind of like he was not really trying to start something new, but this bread was just so good. And so he started kind of thinking about this idea of bringing this bread that we were making for ourselves and for people in our community at a very small scale. He started toying with the idea of bringing it to a larger audience and building a company. And it was kind of like we were having a conversation. And I was just like, I want to help with this. Like, I want to help with the bread. And it kind of came out. And then I was just like, yeah, actually, I do. Like, I'm already administrating teams. Like, I might as well do this for something that I really actually care a lot about. And so that's kind of how it happened that I joined the team.
And this is great. You've kind of positioned me really well to look at what you started talking about a little bit right in the beginning in terms of the recipe and how the bread came about, and you talked about Adam, and how he kind of found this magic recipe. It'll be great to now really hear in detail about what is it about this recipe that kind of attracted you enough that the Renaissance woman came into bread making.
Yeah. So, well, gosh, so many pieces that tie into it. At the time that I met Adam, I wasn't eating bread at all. There's a couple things that played into that. I was noticing that gluten wasn't making me feel great. I'm not celiac or anything or like anaphylactically allergic to gluten, but I just noticed that I would get a little tired and groggy when I would have gluten. I also struggled with an eating disorder throughout undergrad and graduate school, and I just found that eating most bread products was like it was kind of triggering, and so I just stayed away from it. And actually, there was the weekend that I met Adam that I tried this bread for the first time, and it was different back then because it was being made by the person who delivered the recipe to us from Argentina. It had sunflower and flax, as well as the specific seasonings that he was choosing to put into the bread at the time, and buckwheat. And it was just so different. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, it was delicious. Like, first off, it was just like, oh my gosh, this is so yummy. Wait, so you're sure this doesn't have gluten and it doesn't have any of those weird like gums or binders or any of the weird stuff that they put in gluten-free bread? He's like, no, it's just like buckwheat and seeds and flavoring and the other thing was just it just like the way that it sat in my body, it just felt really nutritious and just totally everything about it just aligned with the way that I wanted to be eating. And I couldn't believe it was bread. So I was just like, I just kind of like wrote, bread was just like, oh yeah, bread's just not healthy. It's a guilty food. Like it's like a guilty pleasure kind of food. I only eat bread on special occasions. And this was just like, oh no, I'm going to eat this every day.
And
Yeah.
and of course, I'm sure you've dug a lot more into it. What I have noticed also in my travel and heard from people that it's also the U.S. side of gluten. It's
Yeah.
actually to do with GM or whatever it is, but European bread tends to sit better. So what is it? Is that to do with GMO? What is do you know what is the exact reason why the wheat in US is so much more difficult to digest?
I don't know exactly, but there is some, and again, like I don't know exactly, and the research is not exactly conclusive on the subject, but there is some pretty strong evidence that shows that it's actually not the gluten content of wheat, but the glyphosate that has been impactful. And in some cases, it's just directly like, okay, you're eating conventionally grown wheat. It's covered with glyphosate. It's destroying your gut. The glyphosate is. And then in other cases, it's like there's a neurological pathway that gets formed. So if you ate a lot of wheat and it had a lot of glyphosate on it, your body is like programmed to react a certain way to the gluten because it remembers them being connected, which I think is what happens for me. Because even if I eat like super clean gluten, it triggers my for me it's like an allergy, almost like a hay fever. It's different for everybody, but I notice that my allergy symptoms get really aggravated by wheat and gluten products, even if they're like super, super clean and from like heirloom wheat, that was hand ground yesterday or whatever. It's just like, it doesn't matter. My body still reacts.
That's interesting. Yeah, I haven't, like, of course, I grew up in India and wheat was primary, depends on where you come from in India, but it was literally an everyday thing. And my gut is really good with wheat when I'm in India, but it doesn't work well when I'm in US, which is so interesting. So I was thinking, maybe there is some connection to the way it's grown. GM is illegal in India, so I thought maybe that could be the connect. But
Yeah,
as you
and it
said,
could also be that too. Like anything that's certified organic is also non-GMO. Like that's part of the organic certification. Like when crops are selected, like the way that we pick and choose which strains of wheat we're going to grow based on their
Cloning,
properties was
like
sorry,
cloning mother
it's not
plants, and then
cloning. It's like speeding up natural selection in a way. So
yeah,
they'll take like hundreds of different seeds and they'll grow them all in the same environment. They'll expose them to the same like fungus or the root. There's like a root fungus on wheat that makes it really that made it really challenging to grow in the United States for a while. I don't know if that affected Europe. It probably did, but it might have been to a lesser degree. So it could also just be that out of the process of trying to grow wheat that was resistant to the pests and funguses that are present in the United States, we ended up growing wheat that's more inflammatory to people's systems. But
yeah,
I'm not
could be,
100% sure about like the genetic differences between the wheat that's grown
yeah.
in the US and
And
Europe.
that's fine. Let's get to the more interesting
Yeah.
stuff of Pacha. You know, so one
Okay,
thing
that's
is to
interesting.
kind of like bread, but the other is to build a business around it. That's not quite the same thing. You know, you can like all the bread you want and make it for yourself, like Adam was doing. But the other is to say, you know, we need to, this is a great business idea. So talk to us about that journey of you joining Adam and then saying that I'm going to build this, and really would really love to learn the major challenges that you saw once you took that plunge.
Gosh. Yeah. So well, I'll just say I probably never would have done this if I hadn't had a partner who had done it before. You know, this wasn't Adam's first rodeo building a multi-million dollar company. And so that made it much easier for me to say, okay, like I'm going to make the jump and I'm going to turn this cottage industry bread baking thing we have going on into something what it is now. Yeah, it's definitely not for the faint of heart. Um, it's a risky thing to do, right? In order to grow a company at the rate that we're growing Pacha, it requires investment capital. So whether that's your own money or whether that is the money of your friends and family, that's a lot of what our seed money was. You're just putting a lot on the line. And there's a lot of companies that exist one year and then they just don't exist the next. But I think for us, you know, in the beginning, some of the primary challenges were COVID related. We started in April. We opened our first little 300 square foot kitchen. The lease started on April 1st of 2020. Like
Perfect
COVID's
timing.
happening and we're just like, okay, I guess we're going to figure out the bread thing. We can't do anything else. So, you know, I guess that's good. Certain blessings, right? Like food manufacturing was not shut down. You know, if you had to go make food, you had to go make food. So um, we weren't impacted in that way, but it was really challenging at that time to, you know, our original business plan was to sell the bread into grocery stores. And like, we didn't have any plans to start an online, like, it doesn't really make sense to sell frozen bread online. That's not where most people start when they're thinking about that. But for the most part, like things were just so weird in the world that the people who make decisions about what's going on the shelf at the grocery stores were just like, we're just pausing. We're just gonna like everything that we were doing before, we're just gonna try and keep doing it. We're just trying to keep the trade like on the tracks here. And so everything just kind of like plateaued and just like stopped. And so we had absolutely no success in the first year or even the first 2 years getting grocery store buyers to say, yeah, your product is great. Like, let's put it on the shelves. And then, you know, as we kind of climbed our way out of COVID, that started to shift. But yeah, the saving grace for us was that a friend of ours was in the direct to consumer realm and he looked at our product and he said, you know, like, as weird as this sounds, I think that Patcha could actually could be a good product to sell direct to consumer. And I mean, essentially because we were like, well, if we don't do that, we're not going to exist next year. We went for it. And so we ended up building a pretty healthy online component of our business. Right now, it's about half of all the business that we'll do. That will become a smaller and smaller portion as we continue to grow our retail presence. But yeah, a surprising number of people. It's surprising. And then at the same time, it's not surprising, right? Like, if you, like, I just think about myself and like, I wasn't eating bread for like 5 years because I was just like, there's just nothing good enough. Like, there's just nothing that actually meets my requirements. Like, I just give up. I'm not eating bread. Cool. I'm not the only person in the country that was like that. And it's actually kind of easier to reach those consumers through platforms like Instagram and like online communities, etc. They're all just tucked away into their various corners of the world. So if you can sell them a product that lands on their doorstep, there's just no barrier. It's not, you don't have to sell it into every single grocery store in every single neighborhood to reach everybody that wants it. So yeah.
I was going to ask you a little more on two things, and you may have add ons to that. One was to do with the initial marketing, since you're
Yeah.
suddenly pushed into this area of the unknown. You had a certain charted path that you're going to go into grocery stores and what have you. And like you said, you found yourself in a place where you had to market online. Um, and then logistics, because that shifts completely, right? So if you
Yeah.
have to now deliver to the door in a frozen form, that's a very
Hmm.
different structure. And of course, we will get to the packaging because that's what the whole idea for the show is about. But talk to us before we get into the packaging on how did you meet that challenge of shifting the logistics completely?
Yeah. So one, like in the beginning when we first started shipping the bread, we were like, okay, we're gonna, all right, well, so we'll package it with this, like, we were using this like denim insulation. We didn't want to use, we were clear that we were not just going to start putting everything in styrofoam and like, you know, that was just completely the opposite of why we started the company. So at first we were using this like denim, I think it's pipe insulation that we were cutting. We were like cutting it to size and putting it in the USPS boxes, and then we were also including dry ice because we wanted the bread to stay frozen. And oh my goodness, there was like, just, we had like big like cutting mats, with like the rotary cutters. And at our facility, there was just like all this little like blue lint. It was all over the floor. Like, not, I mean, like not all over the floor, but it was just like you could just find it everywhere. It's like stuck to your clothes and like, oh my gosh, what is this? We can't keep doing this. This is terrible. Um, and eventually we got to a place where we realized that what we really needed to do was we needed to get the bread, we needed to make sure the bread could get to the customer within 2 to 3 days, and it was okay for the bread to thaw. So if we just sold it, if we packaged it with good insulation and sent it via not USPS, not reliable ship times, note to yourself that, then it would reach the customer's door. It would be thawed, but they could just put it back in the freezer. Luckily, our product stands up to that, to be like going through a couple of different freeze thaw cycles, and it still is totally like 100% edible. And then we found the other thing that was challenging with the logistics there was like we were spending so much time custom cutting that denim insulation down that we were like, all right, we have to find a different solution. We need like a custom made insulation piece. And we found, I'm not remembering what the company is called right now. I know we were like ordering it through Uline, but we found a company that makes just like a paper based.
So Temper Pack is, of course, one of the bigger ones, but
Actually,
there
wait,
is
maybe it
Cruise
is.
Foam.
I think it's Temper Pack
Yeah,
actually.
so they put 2 sheets of paper and
Yeah,
stuff inside, which is cellulose based, and it's all compostable.
yeah, right. Yeah, the two that we looked at were like green cell foam and then Temper Pack. We went with Temper Pack. So yeah, we ended up we got the paper based insulation from Temper Pack, and it does a really really great job keeping our product cool on its way to people's houses. And it's actually really funny. I've had a couple of people, true sustainability nerds, say that they got the bread and they had to keep the box because the insulation was so nice. They're like,
We
I
will
keep it.
we
I
will
take.
let tag Peter when we release the episode. He'll be happy
Yeah,
to
yeah,
learn this.
totally. They say they're like, yeah. I keep it and like I take it to the beach. Like I use it as my little cooler because then I know like if I need to like send it home with somebody, I can just give it to them and it's all good. But it's really nice. It's really nice insulation.
And what about the marketing shift? Because suddenly you find yourself in a place where you need to market differently. You don't have to, you cannot visit grocery stores. You're doing direct marketing. And of
Yeah,
course, you have different social media channels. And I guess that's up your alley. Well, it's up Adam's alley, but
yeah.
you get to learn that as well. So how did that shift happen?
Well, so it honestly it wasn't much of a shift in terms of like right because we were not getting much traction in selling the product into grocery stores. We weren't doing much marketing for a grocery store. Like we weren't doing a bunch of retail marketing. We were just starting out. So the first thing that I learned was e-commerce. And it's actually like actually quite a nice channel to start a product on because for a relatively small budget, you can test your messaging. You put out a bunch of different you put out 20 different ads that all have a different hook, a different target audience, a different just different messaging, and you just see what works. You see what people are resonating with, and then you hammer on the things that you find are effective. It's like it's not like if you were to do that in retail to try to understand what kind of messaging and marketing the consumer really resonates with, you'd have to do like a market research study, and those can cost $25,000, right? Like whereas, you could spend $25,000 in ads and you could get most of the same information and also reach like hundreds of thousands of people in a month. Um, so it's like market research plus brand awareness all in one. Yeah.
Did you have to stay a little bit constricted on your reach because it's a 2 to 3 day shipping? So how far could you go from San Diego, and how did you decide that, okay, this is the broad area we're going to do? And what was the shipping that you ended up using then?
Yeah. So we are constrained to the continental US and Hawaii. We're constrained by where we can do FedEx 2 day. Some like in like some areas of the country that's through their ground, but in most areas of the country it's 2 day. It goes by air. Yeah.
And that must affect the costing as well. And does that make you concerned? Because, okay, the customer will ultimately pay till a certain amount. And then, of course, if you were to sell next door, it would be a different price. But if you have to send it all the way, well, Hawaii is a different, but even if you're sending it upstate or something,
Yeah.
the cost probably really adds up in order to be able to do that. And how do you manage that bit?
Yes, the cost does add up. It is expensive to ship bread directly. The cost is built into the price on the website. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting psychological piece, right? On our website, we sell the bread so it depends on what size you buy the bread in, but basically we sell it for $12 a loaf. And we sell it in multi packs. So you can't just go onto our website and buy one loaf of bread because it's just like it doesn't we lose money on that kind of transaction. We lose money if you just buy 2 loaves and you never come back to the site again, we lose money. But if you buy 2 loaves of bread and then you come back to the site because you liked it, all of a sudden we're profitable with our customers. So yeah, there's some interesting things that go into the direct consumer piece because essentially like one of the most important metrics is the customer acquisition costs. So like it can cost a lot of money to acquire a customer depending on what you're selling. In our industry, it's like floating between the $18 and $26 per customer, per new customer. So as you can imagine, if they go and buy a 2 pack and it costs us $26 to acquire them, we're losing money on that. But then when they come back a second time, our profit margin on the bread that we ship directly to customers is higher than what we sell to distributors. So um, yeah, it works once we get them to like the bread, which they mostly do.
And what is it? So if you're selling in a grocery store, is the pricing different, or you just keep it the same? Because I guess the cost would be different, and the
No, that
shipping cost is different.
so it's cheaper for people to buy it in the grocery stores. And like honestly, it's environmentally, it is a much better way for us to distribute our bread is to send it on in whole trucks to distribution points and have people buy it at the grocery store. So eventually our business will like probably go all the way to just retail once we have sufficient coverage and people can get the bread. So we kind of know that that's going to happen. But it's cheaper to buy it at the grocery store. It's definitely cheaper.
Super. And
Yeah.
that takes us well into the ecological side.
Yeah.
Let's start with the whole idea of the ingredients first. And you say that you even make sure that it is sourced from regenerative agriculture. And of course, that in itself, again, I'm sure it adds to the cost, but it also adds to the complexity.
Mhm.
So how did you manage to figure out, okay, this is where we need to buy each of these things and get it right and get your partners who are your vendors onboarded?
Well, okay, so in the terms of like the complexity of finding our partners, our product makes it kind of easy for us because it is primarily buckwheat. So we source two ingredients from regenerative sources. One is the buckwheat and one is coconut sugar. Everything else is appears in our bread in such small quantities that it's not really possible for us yet to set up direct relationships with regenerative suppliers. And yeah, it's hard to get to just go order regenerative ingredients. Like even if you are totally willing to pay the highest prices for XYZ, it's just hard to source it because not everything is available in regenerative format. For the buckwheat, we started out with just certified organic buckwheat. We bought it from a mill called Mindak. They're one of the only buckwheat suppliers in the country. And we, in some way, we kind of stumbled into the relationship with our supplier. We were having a conversation with another brand, another San Diego based brand. They're called Little Bucks, and she makes like a buckwheat based granola. And we were just talking about, we're talking about sourcing and like where are you getting your supply from? Are you having any issues with, contracts, et cetera, getting enough buckwheat contracted? And she had started up a conversation. She had a line of one flavor of her product that she was getting certified regenerative with the Regenerative Organic Alliance, ROA. And in her search to find the supplier that she was using, she had spoken to our farmer. His name's John Strous. He's based in Minnesota. He runs an ingredient supply company called Field Theory, and he is so cool. We met John. We called him up after getting his contact information from Emily, and just kind of like it's like, okay, so what's going on? Like, we're interested in regenerative buckwheat. Like, what's your story? And essentially he's just like he's a farmer from the Midwest and he learned about regenerative agriculture. Just for a little bit of context, like most farmers, this is like, yeah, most farmers learned how to farm from their parents. They do what they know. Like, yeah, I mean, like their entire skill set has come down from their parents who did things a certain way. And it's really hard to shift your farming methods. Like you have all these systems set up, you're not making that much money. Like it's not like you can just like go and buy all new equipment one year. Like, and it's risky, right? So like the idea of like, okay, well, I'm just going to stop using this pesticide that I have always needed to prevent my crops from being completely decimated. Like, yeah, most farmers are like regenerative agriculture. Like, I don't think so. John, on the other hand, learned about regenerative agriculture and was just like, what? Like, this just makes sense. And just for those out there who are listening to this and like asking, well, like what is regenerative agriculture? Essentially, regenerative agriculture at its essence is agricultural methods that care for the soil. So they focus on making really healthy soil ecosystems. The idea being that the healthier your soil is, the healthier your food is, the healthier everything in the system is, so that, like, and we all know what it looks like to pour a cup of water onto like dirt, like a patch of dirt versus like, like black, vibrant potting soil. Like it just soaks the water right up. And that's because there's a whole living matrix of soil creatures. There's the nematodes and the microorganisms and just the whole fungus and the roots and the air. And you know if your soil isn't, if you are trying to grow something in dirt, it doesn't have any of that spongy living biomass. Yeah, and really the idea with regenerative agriculture is to take care of the soil in such a way that you don't need pesticides. You have an ecosystem that is in balance. You have the things that eat the pests. You have the water can stay in the system. You don't need to kill the herb. You don't need herbicides because the things that you are trying to grow are in balance with the other things that you're planting, and you're just creating a system, a balanced ecosystem. And so John heard about this concept and was like, well, that's a no-brainer. That's that's what we need to be doing. Why are we spraying chemicals all over our fields and like, watching his neighbors contract, like come down with cancers and you name it, just ruining the water supply, overwatering, water like runoff, a lot of fields that don't have healthy topsoil. If there's an over input of water, they tend to just create flooding and lots of muddy rivers running through the fields and washing away whatever topsoil there might have been there before. Yeah, so he's just like, this just makes sense. And so he is the one who introduced us to the regenerative certifier that we work with. They're called the Soil and Climate Initiative. They used to be Soil Carbon Initiative. And they help farmers transition their acreage to regenerative methods. Brands actually pay a fee directly to the farmers. So we pay $25 an acre to the farmers to help them, to support them in transitioning their methods. Yeah. So, and with buckwheat in particular, it's really cool. Buckwheat is it's like it's a ground cover. And a lot of farmers actually grow buckwheat and they never harvest it because they just use it to just keep the topsoil in place between plantings, and it's a nitrogen fixer as well. So they use it, they'll plant the buckwheat, let it grow, and then till it into the soil and then plant their next thing, and they just won't ever harvest it. But for our growers, most of them were not growing buckwheat before. They were growing other organic crops. And the buckwheat has a short enough growing season that you can often plant it between other crop rotations. So it's like a bonus. um, and yeah, what's happening for us is actually John is passionate about the regenerative piece. He's also a farmer, and so he can speak the language of these organic farmers and say like, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm growing regenerative buckwheat for this company, and it's good for my soil. All the things that I get to put in place are good for the planet, good for my health, good for the health of all the land around me, and like it works from a monetary perspective. Like this is going to help make you profitable, and you're not going to need to rely on these chemical companies to make your pesticides and your fertilizers, etc. Like you should totally try this." And so he enrolls our farmers for us. Thank you, John. Yeah, because when we called farmers about it, like, hey, we'd really love to like grow regenerative buckwheat. What do you think? Do you want to like go get certified? They're like, no, I think I'm just gonna keep growing my organic buckwheat. Just I'm doing just fine as it is. Thank you very much. Like,
We would like to take a minute to thank our sponsors. Good Garbage is sponsored by Patcha, a family of brands that produces compostable packaging and works to implement regenerative solutions. Patcha's new project is to bring compostable food serviceware and food carry products to the North American marketplace. Learn more at patcha.com. Now back to the conversation. Yeah, it's so fascinating, the whole cycle of how things are produced and how things are consumed and how they go back, and of course the whole idea for us also is around compostable packaging, which
yeah,
is part of the whole spiel is that ideally you want enough consumption, which means you want enough compost, which is healthier, and again leads to the regenerative ag idea. We actually lived on a permaculture orchard in India, and then before we shifted to US, it was a huge movement even there, and it was a huge movement in India. It's more traditional systems which were pretty much in place before. A
yeah,
lot of it also comes to biodynamics and things like that. But there's a guy there who's created this whole movement called zero budget spiritual farming, which is basically that you don't need any pesticides, herbicides.
right,
You need to basically work with nature and let nature teach you rather than you trying to govern and that sort of thing. So it's
sure,
fascinating, the whole subject. But of course, I want to pivot very quickly to the idea of packaging. And
sure.
of course, as Patcha, you've chosen compostable packaging after listening to you for the past over 45 minutes. I think it's clear that you have this affinity that leads you there. But talk to us more about the idea of packaging and then finding the right suppliers to get you the right materials.
As a company, in a sense, we've made it easier for ourselves to go with compostable and sustainable packaging because we've built it into the company's DNA. Like rather than starting out with the cheaper option, just saying like, okay, well, let's just use the plastic for now because that's the thing that's easier to get and it's we can do it in small batches and like we'll just use that and then once we get to a certain scale or like once we become profitable or once we reach that thing, we'll start doing it right. Like we just said, no, we're just going to do it right from the beginning because that's what we believe in. And yeah, so like we didn't run into the trap of getting ourselves of setting our cogs artificially low is how I will say that because I do think that plastic makes your cogs artificially low. Our first iteration of packaging was cellulose bags, like compostable cellulose bags with a compostable sticker on it. So for our very small scale beginnings, we're like, okay, well, like this is what we can get. We can't print on a bag at the scale that we are currently operating. So like that'll be our round one. So still fully compostable. And then, but we started immediately researching, what other options were out there. What were people doing in terms of, like what were the different ranges? There's quite a bit of industrially compostable material that's on the market. We were not so impressed with that as an option because of the end of life for those products is so specific and so unattainable in most areas that we were like, okay, I think we can do better. Like let's look for something that we could put into our own compost pile if we needed to. And that let us, there's only a handful of companies that are making compostable film. And gosh, so one of the big things that was a challenge for us was figuring out actually like how we were going to package the bread because our first iteration, okay, so we had the cellulose bags with the stickers. The next iteration of the packaging that we did was a unmarked bag from Grounded Packaging. It was a vacuum seal bag. And so we were vacuum sealing our loaves in this, it was like a cassava and eucalyptus based film. And then we put that into a cardboard box. It was beautiful. It was like such a nice billboard to have a cardboard box, but it was super expensive. to do it that way. And but just kind of because we had started vacuum sealing it, we thought that we kind of needed to keep vacuum sealing it. And most automated vacuum seal machines take a plastic film and they kind of they heat it up and blow it out, right? So it's called a pillow pack, and we were looking at that. And in order to get the home compostable material to work with that method, it would have had to be like 7 or 8 or 9 mils or something. It was like a ridiculously thick piece of material. And there was just, it was way too expensive. It was also just like, that is so much material. Like, is it better to do plastic in that case? Like, I don't, the plastic just performs so much better in the vacuum seal realm. But then we did some more testing and we kind of got to the point where we realized, wait, like we don't actually need to vacuum seal our bread. And actually like the bread, as weird as it sounds, like it can get freezer burn if in the bread bags, it can. But it once it's thawed, it's actually better for it to have a little bit of air circulation, like just to wick some of the moisture away from the bread. It actually helps the bread to not to spoil. So just a little bit of like, because we were so hung up when we tried to do like automated vacuum sealing, we we did some testing and found like, oh wow, we can just do a bread bag. And that made it much more accessible because turning the home compostable film into a simple gusseted bag was achievable. We were the first brand to ask for that format of the home compostable film from Grounded, and it was a literal, oh my gosh, it was just the most frustrating. It was one of the most frustrating things that we ever had to deal with. Actually, Grounded is headquartered in London, and a lot of their manufacturing is in China. And then the representative that we were working with was based in Australia. So just like multiple time
Wow,
zone
it's true
differences there.
globalization.
Yeah, exactly. It's super global. But then it's just like the lead times that we were experiencing with trying to get the product, and especially in the period of time where we were like developing a new product with them, it was like months, and every like each deliverable that we had that we were like, okay, we need this by April 1st. It's like, cool. That's going to come to you on June 15th. And we're like, oh my gosh. We were so behind schedule with some of our bread bags that we were like, okay, we need to order some more cellulose bags. We're just going to have to stick them with those compostable stickers. Like we're just going to have to go back to what we did before to bridge the gap here. And in trying to order large quantities of cellulose bags, we realized like, oh, they actually can make us they could make our bread bags for us. And there was a company, and I'm not remembering, it might have been Walmart, right? Might have been
Who
Walmart.
would have thought?
Who would have thought? But so they had done like 6 months worth of supply of bread bags in this home compostable material that's made by Prison Pack. It's a potato starch based material. They had done it for about 6 months with Prison Pack, and then they decided like it's not worth it. People don't care that much. We're not going to spend our money here. And so they had the technology already developed, and so they were like, "Yeah, we can make you a bread bag. Yeah, home compostable. Let's do it. Like easy." So we now have a U.S. based supplier. Thank God. So much easier to work with. Yeah, and they do a great job. So, and then I actually have a bread bag here, so you can see. It's just, it looks completely like just like any other bread
Yeah, and
bag,
it's well
right? Like,
printed, and yeah.
yeah, you wouldn't be able to tell the
Does it
difference.
crinkle more? Does the sound has a deeper crinkle or no? It says no, it
Not
doesn't. No,
really.
like because I inferred to that because one of the challenges PLA had, which is of course
Yeah.
industrially compostable, was very brittle and crinkly. And one of the things Frito-Lay's launched a product 10 years back, and they had to withdraw from Sun Chips because it was so loud that
Interesting.
they had to withdraw their PLA
Gosh.
back.
Louder than the like mic.
Yeah, you can imagine in a cinema hall or something, people opening. It was really loud. So
Wow, okay.
they had to, that was the reason. So that's why I was asking. And that's yeah, that looks
Yeah.
very sharp.
So, yeah. And then we use these closures. They're cardboard,
Wow, that's amazing.
which you're just like, why aren't all of those cardboard?
Yeah. Yeah. Why do we need to use a plastic
Why
closure?
are they plastic?
Yeah,
I
they're
will
going to be
say, I
thrown
mean,
away
they
very
do
quickly.
break down, right? So, like, they bend and they become ineffective after several uses, but like, great. Then they go into the recycling bin.
Yeah. Okay. So just I'm fascinated with this kind of literally adamance that I'm going to stay compostable. Not many people have that, and it'll be so. So tell me about the differential in cost. So what if you were to succumb and say that I'm going to use a regular poly bag? How much extra? If you just look at the packaging cost, how much more are you paying today for this kind of absolute adamance that I'm going to not do that?
Yeah. Um, I would have to look into the financial model to really understand like on the large scale. But I mean, from what I remember, these bags cost somewhere between like 11 and 15 cents a bag. And it again, it depends on the scale of production. So if we order a small run of bags, it could cost us up to like 28 cents a bag or something. We don't do that. We don't order small runs. And an equivalent plastic based bag would be like in the 2 or 3 cent range. So it's like
Wow, that's
it's
huge. That's like a
significant.
4x on your
Yeah.
cost. It's Rex,
Yeah. And I mean,
and
like,
that's very idealistic.
yeah. And
Super.
yeah. But, so on the one hand, it's like, oh my gosh, especially as you start to scale these cogs out, like at this point, we've now made like more than 500,000 loaves of bread. So like 500,000 times whatever, 8 cents. Like that's a lot of money that we
It's
spent
a
on
lot of money.
packaging that we didn't necessarily need to, we didn't need to do it that way. But when we approached Whole Foods, so Whole Foods was our first national account. They're also just an amazing, like for our product, they are the best grocery store for us to sell into. Like the
Absolutely.
consumer shops at Whole Foods is the consumer that we want to reach. You know, I don't live in the buyer's brain, but I am 95% sure that the reason she brought Patcha onto the shelves and the reason why she said, yeah, we'll go nationwide with Patcha, let's do it, was because we have it in compostable packaging. Like I remember super clearly, we were on the call and she was like, okay, so like your packaging is compostable. Do you have certifications for that? Like, they're like, yeah, yeah, this, we can show you the certification. And she's like, okay, well, I'm confused because every other brand that I've talked to is telling me that the technology isn't there yet. We aren't able to do it. We can't do compostable. And yet you're here telling me that you're putting your bread in a compostable film. And we're like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, yeah, we're doing it. It's probably more expensive than the other brands are willing to pay, but we're just going with this. This is just how we're going to do it. And she said, okay, we're putting you on the shelves. And yeah, like, so again, there's the intangible benefit that, and right now we as a brand are paying for it, but we're say, we're saving the planet the cost that the true cost. So it's just worth doing it. And I think that the way that the winds are blowing, more and more retailers are realizing that, more and more consumers are going to start realizing it too. Like, it's going to take time, but there's going to be a point where it's just like, yeah, we just have to do it this way. And so
You're
we're leading the
definitely
way.
not talking about the recent wins, but in general,
Yeah.
yes, the recent wins are bring the plastic straw back. But
Um,
But let's not talk about those wins.
Yeah.
So this is beautiful. Of course, as a compostable packaging person, it's absolute music to my ears that a brand would choose something even if it has a much higher cost. So of course, there is one compromise which is in terms of cost. Are there other compromises that you have to make in terms of performance at all? Um, and if they're there, we'd love to learn those. And on the flip side, are there benefits apart from just it being compostable in terms of performance? Do you see any of those, either compromises or benefits?
Sure. In terms of other compromises, yes. So like for our tortilla bags, which are coming very soon, the film that we have to use to make those, just they're a different format of bag. They're a zipper bag, so we have to get it from a different company. They're not see-through in the same way. They have an opacity that is just like the material is just a little bit more opaque than the current film that we're using. Um, Not the end of the world, but it is like if you want the consumer to be able to see your product, it's a thing, right? And it's challenging to print multicolor on this type of bag. Like to do a CMYK print is possible, but not awesome. So, and that's a challenge to the printing when we were first exploring this option, printing multicolor on a plastic bag. Like they're just like, yeah. If you want to do multicolor, you just add a mil and it's like a 0.01 cent increase in the cost and it makes it, yeah, it's just like, yeah, of course, just do that. Obviously, that's the right choice. But the printing on these materials becomes more challenging when you have to go through multiple runs. And then the other challenge is that these bags break down. They're designed to break down. So you can't just keep them on yourself for a year. Like they literally will start decomposing if you hold them on yourselves for too long. So like I said, if you're in a position where you can't like you can't afford a small run, but you won't use a larger run within a year, like that's a pinch point for sure. That makes it challenging. Like you have to scale your business to a certain degree to even be able to like make it make sense, the economics of it. And
But
not
hopefully, the bread is not staying on your shelf for a year,
no,
anyways.
no,
So that's a good thing, at
no.
least with your product. But go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, we're not. Nope. We're not keeping anything stocked for at this point, I think everything's max of like 3 weeks at our facility. Max. So um yeah, so those are some challenges. And we did run into with our first iteration notes. I know this was with the old bag though. Uh, we ran into an issue with like the smell of the material. There was something about so like it's something about the way that the barrier. So often with these films, the oxygen barrier is not as strong or not as secure. So there was like a smell leaching that would happen, and it was like the smell of the ink, and it just smelled bad. It was like, what is that? Like, why does that bag smell like that? But that's not an issue with our current bag manufacturer, and I think it might have also had to do with just like coming from China, sitting in a container on a hot ship in like just like the conditions of the shipping were not lending themselves to the material being in its optimal state. Um, yeah. In terms of benefits, again, I think the benefit is mostly just in the end use, like end of life. There's one of the big hurdles that needs to be cleared in this arena is what happens to this packaging at the end of the life, because most people don't have home compost piles that they can put these into. Most people. And also most industrial composting facilities, like in San Diego, we have green bins and they take your compost, but they don't take any compostable materials, like any kinds of films, even if they will break down in that compost. they don't take them because of either the timescales or just like they just don't have the ability to sort through what's what. Like there's no good way of understanding whether this is just a regular plastic bag or something that will actually break down. Um, so they just don't take them, and that's an issue because like yeah, but on the other hand, even if most of our bags are going to landfill, they are going to break down much, much, much faster than an equivalent plastic, petroleum based plastic bag. It's just so that's the benefit. I would say the other thing that's been fun is just like with these cardboard clips. I just like so many people have been like, oh my gosh, a cardboard clip closure. Like, of course, that's brilliant. Like, I love that you're doing that. Like that piece in particular, like the plastic film, it's so similar to a regular plastic material that people don't even really notice the difference unless they like are really into it and they read through the package and see all the messaging about it. But the cardboard clip closure is just something that like immediately you touch it when you open the bag. It's just this like this touch point where people are like, oh, this is different, this is better. Like this is an obvious thing we should be doing. And so just a little bit like gaining that the brand loyalty just through that little thing.
That's amazing. And how did that come about? Was it same packaging people, or how did you guys decide that, oh, that this can be a possibility, a cardboard clip?
That's a good question. I mean, I think just at the time that we were doing we were trying to figure out the vacuum seal situation. We didn't need a cardboard. We didn't need any kind of closure when we were going to be vacuum sealing, right? But when we started researching the bread bag idea, we were like, okay, well, if we're going to do home compostable film, like how can we shut this and still be home compostable? And this is what we found. So I think it was just our research. We went out looking for it, and it exists. And it is more expensive than the plastic ones.
Oh wow, I would not have thought that. I thought because it's basic cardboard, it should be as economical, if not more.
That is not how it works.
It will eventually. Hopefully,
Eventually,
there'll
I
be
think
more
it
traction. So you
will.
also talked a little bit about runnability, and you talked about taking multiple runs for printing. Has that been sorted, and can it run as the same as any plastic film, or do you still have to pay more for printing than you would on a plastic film?
It's not that you have to pay more for printing. It's just with the specific film that it's not this film, but with the specific film that we were using before, if you wanted to print full color, so a CMYK print, right? You are able to achieve any color because you print with four different colors of ink essentially all over the bag. But printing that many times on the material, the material would start to spread out, like it would start to like actually melt just a little bit. And it's subtle, but then the prints start misaligning, so you start getting like a hand that looks like it has three different shadows of different colors on it, for example. So yeah, that issue still exists. Like yeah, you can't do all the same kind of printing on these materials as you can with just a regular film. Although uh, you know I'm saying that, but what I'm realizing is that it might be the case that you can achieve those kinds of prints by increasing the thickness of the material, which you would also have to do for a regular plastic film. It's just that the difference in cost between a 3 mil bag and a 5 mil bag for this material is really, really big versus for going from a 3 mil bag to a 5 mil bag in a petrochemical plastic is just like it's more expensive by a tiny bit, but it's like so worth it because it's
Yeah.
just it's just hard. It's just a lot more difficult to
Yeah, so print
justify.
print misses are typically because of shrinkage. And you're right, the
Yeah.
compostable materials tend to shrink differently. But normally, what I find is that the toller or the converter is able to figure it out based on their knowledge that okay, the shrinkage will be this much, and hence I'm going to put. But okay, that's a different discussion for another time.
Totally. Yeah.
It is solvable, is what I'm saying. So you've not just stayed with packaging for yourself, but what I see is that you've come to kind of influence various other people as well. So talk to me a little bit more about this One Step Closer Packaging Collaborative.
Yeah. So Patcha is actually not a member of the packaging collaborative right now. Just it's really just primarily from a bandwidth perspective. We're like, cool. We can't like one more administrative thing is like we're doing really good stuff with packaging. Great. Like yeah, we're doing all the things, but we just can't be active with every single group that comes our way these days. But we are a member of the One Step Closer like coalition. We're a member of what's called the Rising Stars, which is like companies with revenue less than 10 million who are growing and doing various aspects of better business. So, whether that's better packaging, whether that's regenerative agriculture, etc., or all of it. But yeah, the One Step Closer Packaging Collaborative is doing incredible work. I mean, essentially they're getting businesses together to make a commitment toward like to take steps towards better packaging, that's more circular packaging. And then they're also just like they are creating a base of of information, of collective buy-in. Just like it's just they're networking companies in a way that's makes the activities of one company so much more impactful, because it's like, well, hey, we want to start putting our bar in a compostable package. And hey, guess what? So does XYZ company. So the four of us would love to strike a deal with you and like get this figured out so that we can all start packaging our bars in compostable packaging, for example. So just leveraging collective powers and sharing resources and like helping to educate companies on the options that are out there. And yeah, having infrastructure for companies to reach out and be like, hey, I'm interested in becoming a part of this collaborative, like I'm interested in learning about packaging. And then all of a sudden they have the support that they need to actually make those changes. So there's some really cool stuff happening.
Yeah, and it's a win-win because even as a supplier, you get some scale because, like you were saying before, if it's a really small run, it becomes expensive for the
Mhm.
supplier too. So if four people come together and the run becomes a little bit bigger, it's also easier for a supplier to come in and provide, and also it gives them a lease of life. A lot of the packaging suppliers are also struggling to find the right customers, and if somebody can bring them together, that works well both ways.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So what about this idea of pledge for 1% for the planet focus, and what are the focus areas there?
Yeah, so we are actually when we started the company, we were part of the 1% for the planet pledge. We still are in theory we're supporters of that, but um we now we pay more than 1% of our revenue to our farmers in the form of our acre fee. So rather than donating that money to 1% for the planet for them distribute to the different nonprofits, we felt that it was better for us to directly assist our farmers in transitioning their regenerative acreage. And it was just like a bureaucratic thing they couldn't 1% for the planet couldn't count that towards our 1% donation. And we were like, okay, all right, well, yeah. So
And the direct is always better. You see
yeah,
the impact of it straight away rather than, okay, you're giving something and it looks good on your package, but you don't really know if it is creating the impact that you're intending to be. So it's a
totally.
good brand thing, but
Yeah,
this is more direct. And even as a company, that what we find is that supporting organizations around us rather than trying to send something really far away is more influential because there's always more things to be done around each of our you know
Totally.
where we exist. So
Yeah.
and you see the impact of that. So just taking the our conversation loop into the closing act kind of thing. So as you scale, do you find it more difficult to source materials, number one? And number two, what about the process itself of making the bread, packaging the bread, etc., etc.? Do you have it in place for a certain, number of pieces or tonnage or whatever you want to calculate? How will that work for you as you scale? Will the same facility be able to do it? Will the same suppliers be able to do it? Or there is a bottleneck that you're going to hit?
Yeah. So in terms of our packaging materials, I'm sure that they will be thrilled when we start ordering more materials for them. For the ingredients, I mean, as long as John is still able to do what he's been doing for us, then we don't foresee an issue. But it is a challenge, and like as we grow, and especially as I'll call it like we're riding this skate ramp where we're like doubling our production every year. There may come a time when we will not be able to get all regenerative buckwheat, for a year period, right? Like we might need to like give a grace period for our farmers to be able to catch up and enroll more farmers in the program, et cetera. So and also just like buckwheat is not the most popular ingredient in the United States. So we're driving the market forward. Um, so one of the things that we're thinking about, and that other people are thinking about as well, is just like, okay, as we scale and as we expand the buckwheat market in the United States, we need to be thinking about like what other areas need to be invested in. Like, so not just growing the brand, but also growing the infrastructure to be able to process the buckwheat that is being grown and produced. So yeah, there will be challenges in that arena for sure. But yeah, we feel confident that we're thinking about it, and that we're going to be able to meet the needs as we continue to grow. And also I think it actually helps that there's several other buckwheat brands in the mix, and so there's a little bit more, like, I'm going to say this, um there's like a cushion or a safety net sort of for the farmers. Like we're developing, because we're like all growing, we're developing the safety net that's like, okay, hey, like, so you're gonna contract your fields, you're gonna switch to regenerative, Patcha's gonna buy all your buckwheat. It's a little bit scary if it's like, okay, cool, but like if Patcha doesn't buy my buckwheat, like who's gonna buy my buckwheat? But if there's other brands out there, and like as in general the market is growing, it becomes easier to like, once there's a little bit of momentum, it's easier for people to see how that momentum could continue.
And is it the same thing with your own processing facility? Can you make ample bread? And I also saw that you were
Yeah.
doing a lot of manual packaging and things like that. Will that shift very quickly, or has that shifted already?
Yeah, yes, it will shift. It is shifting and it will shift. Yeah, as we grow, we will eventually outgrow our current facility, but right now we have the ability to add shifts, and there's a couple of key pieces of equipment that we're going to be adding that are going to increase our production efficacy. There's actually like there's options that we haven't even looked like that. There's definitely some automation that is getting better and better all the time that we may be looking into. So yeah, we'll be able to be in this production facility for the next 2 to 3 years. And then depending on the kinds of innovation that we want to do and what products are coming next, we will likely take some of our other, likely, like the tortillas, there's a good chance that we might move into a separate facility that just does the tortillas, and so kind of minimize the footprint at the facility. But there's a bunch of different ways that can play it, but yes, our current facility is not big enough for the growth that we are projecting in the
And
long term.
now you mentioned Whole Food, and are there other chains who have taken to you now? Who are your biggest buyers and distributors across the country? And this I'm asking from a selfish perspective as well. There's no Whole Foods near me, but there
Yeah.
may be some other one there. So which are
Yeah.
the ones that we can go to?
Well, yeah, near you, there might be a New Seasons. So they've got our
Yeah, not
products.
too far.
Yeah. We are right this year. We're primarily expanding in the natural channel, so focusing on a lot of independents and smaller natural food chains like New Seasons. But we're actively pitching Sprouts. We also we're going to be in 4 regions of Albertsons, and that will be sometime at the end of the year. So your Safeways, etc. And yeah, we're working all the time to expand into new chains, and in a year or two, we hope to be in Target and Kroger, and um, yeah,
That's huge. So it'll be very accessible for those who actually need it, and I think that'll make the Pacha itself grow significantly as well.
totally,
You
yeah,
mentioned a little bit earlier on the funding challenges. Do you think those are you're over the hump, or you think there'll be a more, as you grow and you want to scale faster, there will be more funding needed? And I
there,
ask this because, there's a lot of people who listen who are investing in the space as well.
sure, yes. So it does feel like we're over the hump in terms of getting funding was hard. Like we've been fundraising since we started. That's the truth of it. And we're still fundraising, but it does feel like we have gotten to a point where the the historicals are strong and the upward trend is clear, and the investment, it's we feel confident that we're going to find aligned investors. Now, I mean, there's also just tons of uncertainty with what the markets are going to be doing. Tariffs. Yeah. So, uh, I, it feels like the funding is going to be achievable, and I can't foresee the future. So there may be some maneuvering that we'll have to do that's not the plan that we currently have. But yeah,
So,
the
so I
trust,
am
the trust.
so I am going to have you gaze in the crystal ball and see if you were to look 5 years hence, how would you see what would be your dream for Pacha? This is what maybe it's in scale, it's in impact. How would you word that dream of 5 years hence?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the 5-year vision. I would love to see Pacha. So I'd love to see that Pacha is a trusted household brand. That's a name that's known by, let's just say, 75% of Americans. And I would honestly, if I'm looking into the crystal ball, I'm seeing that that's primarily going to be in the tortillas, that we're going to become a household name with our tortillas, maybe more than our bread. And yeah, I would love to be in most of the primary retailers nationwide. 5 years, if we're talking about 5 years from now, we may be on the verge of entering international markets. I would love to serve some of our audience in, I can't tell you how many requests we get from people in Europe that are like, where can I buy your bread? It would be great to be in Europe. I think that there's a lot of synergy with the markets there, but that would probably be just beginning it in 5 years. And then, yeah, in terms of impact, it's all serving it. In 5 years, what I would really love to see is I would love to be at the point where a certified regenerative product is recognized and valued by the consumer. And I would like to see Pacha 10x its acreage, um, its acre footprint of regeneratively grown buckwheat. Yeah.
That's a very, very clear vision. Just a quick question on the tortilla versus bread. Why do you think that tortilla will grow bigger than the bread?
It's just the bread is amazing, and it's not exactly a one-for-one substitution for white bread. So there's a little bit of a learning curve for consumers. So it's yeah, it's just I feel like the way that I eat pacha bread is kind of its own thing. Yeah, it's just it's kind of a lifestyle shift, sort of. You have to shift your perspective 25% on how you eat bread in order to only eat Patcha bread. With the tortillas, it's just like, yeah, it's a tortilla, like one for one
It's a straight
substitution.
replacement. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're delicious. They are easy. They're super sturdy, pliable. They're yeah, like they're just gonna crush it. I think they're super
Nice. I
good.
love it.
Yeah,
Okay. My final question. What
yeah.
does good garbage mean to you?
What does good garbage mean to me? No garbage. All right. So there's a concept in many different American mythologies, but it's the concept of the Great Circle, right? And so essentially, if you can imagine a circle that's so big that it encompasses everything, everything is inside of the Great Circle. And when you think about that concept, you realize like we are all, everything that we take in and put out is a part of it's a part there's no such thing as throwing something away. It can't leave the circle. The circle encompasses everything, right? So good garbage to me is garbage that finds use again, cradle to cradle, right? Like something that can be born again and reused and not thought of as something that doesn't belong in our circle of existence.
That's beautifully put, Maddie. What a delightful conversation this has been on multiple levels. So, of course, for me personally, food has been very important in terms of not just the body but the mind, and everything we put in becomes us. And then watching you talk about what you guys are doing and how you're evolving food itself is music to my ears personally. And then of course learning about how this whole system works, it's beautiful. Again, like what you said in the end, it's like the big circle, but everything moves around in circles. And the soil and the regen ag and the packaging and all the things that you're tackling are so inspiring, and I'm sure a lot of people who listen will get inspired. And of course, me and many people listening to this are devoted to better packaging. And of course, you kind of sticking your gun to ensuring that you are doing right is a huge thing. And I hope more and more people learn from you and adopt that, so that we can hand over a better future to the people who are to come after us. So thank you for the work you do, and thank you for being on the show.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for putting this together.